Hi, welcome to this fourth episode of Bhagavad Gita short summary series. And today we are discussing fourth Adhyaya, the Gyan, Karm, Sanyas Yoga, or the Yoga of Transcendental Knowledge. What is yoga actually? It's definitely not yoga, the practice of body postures according to the Westerners. Yoga, when done in devotion, is just one of the ways to achieve yogi state, which we will learn in this chapter later. But yoga is when the soul meets the Supreme Soul. So this union of soul with Supreme Soul is called the yoga. When the soul realizes the divinity within and in everything outside. So that is yoga, and that is the purpose of this whole Bhagavad Gita. And that is what Krishna is trying to explain through each chapter. He's explaining various ways of attaining this yoga with the Supreme Soul. In this Adhyaya also, Krishna wants to tell the secret supreme knowledge, the knowledge so subtle and beyond the ego of mind and body, that when understood can help us attain this yoga and live in everlasting peace and bliss. And God here is trying to tell us how we can have this wisdom and union through this transcendental knowledge. When the soul becomes one with its divine higher self and can actually make its contribution in this world with the right intentions, then it fulfills its purpose of coming into this world. That is actually the purpose of this secret knowledge. So in the first verse of this fourth Adhyaya, Krishna is explaining that he first taught this supreme knowledge to the sun god Vivaswan, who then passed it to Manu, and then Manu passed it to his son the King Ikshvaku. And then it got carried on in this world through other enlightened saintly kings like Nimi and Janak, who belong to the same lineage of King Manu and Ikshvaku. But with passage of time, this knowledge got lost. But today, I am revealing this secret supreme knowledge to you, Arjun, because you are my friend, my devotee, and have faith in me. But in the next verse, verse 4, which is actually the question that Arjun is asking because he's confused and curious to hear that. And he's saying, how is it possible that you gave this knowledge many thousand years ago when you are born in this age with me? So in the next few verses from verse 5 to 8, Krishna is revealing the concept of rebirths by telling Arjun that both you and I have had many births, Arjun. However, you forgot, but I remember them all, because I am beyond birth and death. I am unborn. I am all-powerful, all-knowing, and can manifest myself with my Yog Maya, my divine powers. I am the creator of this whole Brahman and keep coming in this world whenever there is a decline in the righteousness, to restore dharma, to restore good over evil, and to re-establish the law and order and the faith in people's hearts. And in the next three verses, 9, 10 and 11, Krishna is explaining that who realizes my divine nature and surrender to me with faith and devotion, they break free from this samsara, the cycle of life and death, and then they never have to come back in this world, and they live with me in my eternal abode. And in the verse 4.11, Krishna is telling that as these souls surrender to me, so I reciprocate them. So what he's trying to say is that whatever way they approach them, he receives them. Whatever way they love them, he loves them back. Whatever way they worship them, accordingly he blesses them. So knowingly or unknowingly, they all are in the paths that lead to me, Arjun, because all paths lead to me. But how they approach me is how I reciprocate them, in the form of mother, father, sister, brother, child, spouse, friend, money, power, wisdom. So in whatever way they want me, I receive them. So in verse 12, he goes on explaining that those who doesn't have this knowledge and are with less knowledge, intelligence and understanding, they want quick success in this world. They want quick results, they want material happiness, so they worship celestial gods. And these celestial gods have received powers from me, and they can bestow boons on those who worship them. But the boon that these gods bestow are temporary and materialistic. The happiness received from these material boons are temporary and short-lived. but those who want everlasting peace, they approach me. And in verse 13, Krishna is saying that there's a difference in the nature of these souls in this world. How they act in this material world, how do they perform their karm, what kind of happiness they want, whom do they approach for results, and how do they approach. And it's because I have designed this Prakriti on the lines of gunas and karmas. And there are these three gunas: Sattva, the mode of goodness; Raj, the mode of passion; and Tam, the mode of ignorance. So everybody that exists in this Prakriti, in this world, whatever it is, falls into these three categories of gunas. And based on these three categories and how the nature of people are formed, I have categorized them into 4 occupations. They come into this world with specific natures based on their previous life karmas and gunas, and accordingly they fall into one of the categories of occupation. And they should remain in those categories and should not jump to other categories, because they are best suited for that particular nature and class and contribute maximum. And they can always get promoted in the next category depending upon their gunas if they strive to understand this transcendental knowledge and find an occupation as per those gunas. And the activities that these souls do or the fruits of their actions do not bind me, because I am eternal and I am not responsible for the categories into which they fall. It's because of their own actions, their own karmas, that they fall into those gunas and occupations. So the Lord here is saying that I am the creator of everything that exists. And He created this material world, this Prakriti, which is fueled by material energy. And this material energy I have just explained in the last verse constitutes of 3 gunas, Sattva, Raj and Tam. And because of these 3 modes is our society, which is classified into 4 categories. So what are these 4 categories? So the number 1 is Brahman, which falls into the mode of goodness and mostly the gurus and the teachers. Second is Kshatriyas. They are in the mode of passion. They are mostly the administrators and the management class who runs the system, who runs this world. The warriors also fall in this class. So Arjun was a Kshatriya. And then come Vaishyas. They are the combination of passion and ignorant mode, and they are mostly the business class, the merchants and the farming people. And last is Shudras. They are in the mode of ignorance and are the working class. So depending on the purity of modes, how good or passionate or ignorant a person is, constitutes his nature and activity, and accordingly he falls into one of those occupations. So God has created this model of 3 gunas and 4 occupations, but He is not responsible for people's natures and occupations and actions. Their actions and consciousness of mind and intellect is responsible and decides what occupation suits them. And whatever actions that I do don't bind me in any way, because whatever I do, Arjun, is for the creation and welfare of my mankind. And nor do I aspire for any fruits of actions. I am beyond these modes, these actions and their fruits. I am not bound by any karmic reactions, and those who understand this truth and are situated in God consciousness also become transcendental to the material energy and its illusion trap. So they basically then exist on a higher frequency and they get liberated from all karmic reactions and they live in freedom. The miseries of life do not affect them. They just come and go like morning and evening, and these people don't get affected by that. Those who realize this truth gets established in my consciousness, and then whatever they do with their minds on me. And then all their actions are surrendered to me in their minds, and hence their karmas get free from any bondage or karmic reactions. So to explain this previous verse, there's an analogy here. Just like rain falls equally in the forest, giving every seed a chance to sprout, and from some sprout trees, from some seeds blossom flowers and fruits, and from some comes grass and twigs, while some turn into thorny bushes. In the same way, God provides every soul the equal chance to act. but the choice to act or not to act and how they act is totally up to them. They have complete freedom to do their karma or not. God does not interfere in that and is not responsible for their choices and actions. The activities of people don't taint him. In fact, he has the powers to purify whatever comes in his contact. For example, sun when falls on a dirty puddle of water purifies it. The dirty puddle of water can't affect the sunlight or impurify it. So nothing in this world can taint him or impurify him. On the contrary, it's God who purifies everything when that thing comes in contact with him. No activity or action in this world can neither affect me nor bind me in my karmic reactions. And those who have known this have realized me and have also got free from karmic reactions. And despite knowing this and becoming realized, these great souls attained enlightenment like King Janak and Bhishma, and they kept on working selflessly for the welfare of other souls to serve the Lord. And for example, Buddha, after attaining enlightenment, he said that people have two choices. Either you do nothing or you help others attain enlightenment. And in the next verse, Krishna explains the science of action. In the verse 16 and 17, he tells what is action, what is inaction. What is that secret of action that liberates us from karmic bondage? And even the intelligent and wise people sometimes get confused in deciding what action is and what inaction is, and what kind of action to do and what kind of action to avoid. For example, Hare Krishna is asking Arjun to fight, but in Vedas it's written that we should follow the path of non-violence. So that's what Krishna is trying to explain here, that sometimes it becomes a complex matter to decide what action to take and what action not to take. So in the verse 17, he's explaining the finer intricacies of actions which even wise people fail to understand. So there are three types of actions. One is Karm. So when someone is doing their prescribed or recommended duties as per their occupations and their dharma, but expecting the fruits of that action in mind, then it is Karm. He is doing his Karm but with selfish motives. Such an action comes in the Raj mode of gunas. Next is forbidden action, Vikarm. That duty or action which is not as per your dharma or your occupation, or which is done in the mode of ignorance. Such action degrades the soul and is in tam mode of gunas. This kind of action is purely for self's pleasure and not for any contribution or welfare in the world, and so should be avoided. And then third is inaction, which is akarm, that action which is done without any attachment to the results, which is done in God consciousness, merely to serve the Lord and all his other souls in this world. This is akarm, actions that is away from the results or the fruits. And this next verse is one of the most important verse of this Adhyaya of knowing the supreme knowledge. So though Krishna has been talking the same thing to act selflessly, but here Krishna is emphasizing a bit more when he says that those who see action in inaction and inaction in action becomes the wisest of all. So what is he trying to explain is that action in inaction is when someone see their prescribed duties or their recommended duties or their social and moral duties not burdensome but as an opportunity to serve God, and they don't do their duties for their own pleasure but to come closer to God and to serve the Lord and his mankind without any selfish intentions. And then those who see inaction in action means that they see selflessness and detachment from results as the only way of executing their prescribed duties. Then such people become the wisest. So Krishna is trying to reflect in the secret of transcendental knowledge that what becomes worship when those people who see their actions as the opportunity to serve Lord as without any attachment to the fruits of actions. When people start having this intention, this consciousness, then they become the wisest and are always satisfied. Work stops seeming as burdensome work to them. They are free from attachment, expectations, ego, ownership, doership, and their senses and mind in control. They are free from jealousy, dualities of life. They are alike in pain and pleasure, success and failure, fame and infamy. They get free from material bondage, karma, and they see their actions as a sacrifice to Lord. Such sages or saintly souls offer everything to God first and then enjoy whatever is left of that offering as His prasad or His grace. Whereas those who perform everything for their own pleasure, they come under the sway of Maya and face downfall in their lives. So from 18 to 23rd verse, that's what Krishna was explaining, the concept of action and inaction and the wise people who start seeing both as same. And now from verse 24 to 33, Krishna is saying that for them everything is sacrifice. Whatever sacrifice is made is Brahman. The fire in which the sacrifice is made is also Brahman, and the doer is also Brahman, and for whom it's done is also Brahman. And so they see everything as God and God in everything. They are free from any ownership and doership. In verse 25th, Krishna is coming to the same point that some souls worship the celestial God with material offerings for quick results, but there are some who offer themselves as a sacrifice in the service of Lord. And this is called Atma Samarpan or Atma Ahuti or offering oneself to God. Swami Mukundananji explains in his book Bhagavad Gita through a quote from Yogi Shri Krishna Prem. In this world of dust and din, whenever one makes Atma Ahuti in the flame of divine love, there is an explosion which is grace, for no true Atma Ahuti can ever go in vain. But what is this process of offering one's own self as sacrifice? So this is performed by surrendering oneself completely to God. Such surrender has 6 aspects to it, which we will learn in the chapter 18th, around the verse 18.66. But here Krishna continues to explain the different kind of sacrifice that people perform. Human beings differ from each other in their natures, motivations, activities, professions, aspirations and sanskaras which they are carrying forward from past lives. So Shri Krishna brings Arjun to the understanding that sacrifices can take on hundreds of forms, but when they are dedicated to God, they become means of purification of the mind and senses and the elevation of the soul. In this verse, he mentions 3 such sacrifices that can be performed. So the first is Gyan Yagya or Gyan sacrifice. There are these Gyani yogis who, inspired by knowledge, offer the functions of all of their senses and their life energy in the fire of controlled mind. They take the help of knowledge to withdraw their senses from the world. They engage in deep contemplation upon this illusory nature of the world and the identity of the self as distinct from body, mind, intellect, and ego. The senses are withdrawn from the world and the mind is engaged in the meditation upon the self. And the goal is basically to become practically situated in self-knowledge, in the assumption or the truth actually that self is identical with the supreme ultimate reality. So they indulge in developing knowledge through which they want to make their sacrifice. And the next is a Dravya Yagya or Dravya sacrifice. So these are those who are inclined towards earning wealth and donating it in charity towards a divine cause. Although they may engage in large and complicated business endeavors, yet their motivation remains to serve God with the wealth they earn. So their motivation is make all you can, save all you can, give all you can. And then third is Yogi Yagya. So the Patanjali Yoga Darshan describes an 8-fold path called Ashtang Yoga for spiritual advancement, starting with physical techniques and ending in the conquest of the mind. So yogis practice these physical postures of Ashtanga Yoga, which we discussed as yoga. As we all know yoga, they do it along with the chanting of his divine names. Such a combination of yogic postures along with devotion results in physical, mental, and spiritual purification of the practitioner. While some yogis offer their sans, their breath, to regulate the prana in their body, and this practice is called pranayam. So these yogis control their breath and engage in the advanced kumbhak techniques. While some yogis offer their sans, their breath, to regulate the prana in their body. This practice is called pranayam, and the yogis control their breath and engage in the advanced kumbhak techniques to offer their sacrifice in purifying their senses and mind and elevating their soul. And some restrict their food intake and are very, very careful about what they are eating, how they are eating, and in how much time they are eating, in how much gap they are eating actually, and with what intentions they are eating. When the diet is curtailed and senses become weak, and the saman, which is responsible for digestion in our body, is made to neutralize itself. So this is the nature of the sacrifice that some people perform. So that's how one can make sacrifices, through which one can self-educate, self-control, self-discipline, and self-master themselves to tame their senses and mind and control their desires and live freely without the unnecessary burden of engaging in worthless fulfilling of the void desires. And not only the sacrifice is important, but the intentions with which it is made is also very, very important. The actual secret of sacrifice lies in the intention with which it's made. When the people making the sacrifice offer it to Lord, that is, whatever I am sacrificing, all its fruits and the results are for you, my Lord, not for me. So take all the fruits of this sacrifice. They don't want anything for themselves, and they go on saying, and in case whatever is left after my Lord's pleasure, I'll take it as your grace or prasad. So that's how they offer their sacrifice. And in the next verse, 4.33, Krishna tells that sacrifice made in this intention is very wise. And sacrifice made in this wisdom is superior to any sacrifice with physical act. Physically, you may dwell in meditation or reading scriptures or donating money or practicing hatha yoga, fasting or pranayam, but it all goes in vain if your intentions are selfish. Sant Kabir quotes it beautifully. O spiritual aspirant, you have been rotating the chanting beads for many ages, but the mischief of the mind has not ceased. Now put those beads down and rotate the beads of the mind. So one can rotate those rosary beads all their life, but there is no point rotating those beads if the mind is dwelling on the worldly pleasures and the fruits of actions. Many people in this world keep fast, even tough fast, but just for physical and material reasons or the fruits, whereas their mind thinking about the limited actions and that they can eat during the day or that fast and the results they will be getting from those fast. So one may be sacrificing physically, but the best sacrifice is the sacrifice made in this transcendental knowledge of selflessness and detachment from those results, and then performing the actions accordingly. And now Krishna goes on explaining that how can one attain this spiritual wisdom. So now Krishna is explaining in the verse 34 and 35 that one can approach a spiritual master or guru who knows this transcendental knowledge. And Krishna emphasized that a person should ask humbly to Guru and do selfless service towards Guru with complete submission in him to know this secret knowledge. The spiritual knowledge is revealed in the heart of the disciple by Guru's grace when the disciple destroys his ego and develops humility and a serving attitude towards Guru and others. So Prahlad Maharaj beautifully quotes it, until we bathe ourselves in the dust of the lotus feet of a saint, we can never have an experience of the transcendental platform. And then from verse 36 to 42, Krishna is explaining how purifying is this spiritual or transcendental knowledge, what happens to those who realize this knowledge and those who fail to realize. So, following this path and attaining an enlightenment from a guru, hey Arjun, you will no longer fall into the delusion. In the light of this knowledge, you will see that all living beings are but part of Supreme and are within me. Under the illusion of Maya, we see this whole world as separate from ourselves and God, and we feel the friendship with or enmity with other human beings depending upon how they satisfy our self interest. But spiritual knowledge changes our perspective on how we see the world. Enlightened beings see this world and everything and every being as the energy of God and feel the connection in them. He understands the oneness of everything. And we can understand the essence of this with the self-talk that Hanuman is saying in his mind. I see the forms of Lord Ram and Mother Sita in everyone. And so I fold my hands and have respect to all. So that's how enlightened souls see me in this world, in everything and everywhere. And in verse 36, Krishna is telling Arjun and every Arjun in this modern world that material world is like a vast ocean where one is tossed around the waves of birth, disease, old age and death. Everyone go through certain kind of miseries. And there are three kinds of miseries actually. The miseries due to one's body and mind, our physical and mental suffering, in Hindi, Adhyatmik. And then second kind of miseries is miseries due to others, which is emotional suffering, which is Adhibhautik. And then third is miseries due to climatic and environmental conditions or the political conditions, and it's called Adhidevik, for example, natural calamities or war. So like a football, the soul is kicked around the hell and heaven according to its karmas, but divine knowledge provides the boat to cross over that material ocean. In the verse 37th of this chapter, Krishna is explaining that as the heat of a fire can burn down the whole forest to ashes, the fire of knowledge can burn all your karmas to ashes. And when we surrender to God, He burns the stockpile of our endless karmas of all our past lifetimes and releases us from the material bondage. And in verse 38 and 39, he says, there is nothing more purifying than divine knowledge, and those whose faith is deep, and those whose senses are trained and mind disciplined, attain wisdom and everlasting peace. And in verse 38 and 39, he goes on saying, there is nothing more purifying than divine knowledge, and those whose faith is deep, and whose senses are trained and mind disciplined, attain wisdom and everlasting peace. But, in verse 40, but the ignorance, the slaves of senses and mind lack faith in this knowledge. They keep doubting it and they suffer delusion and downfall and sorrow in their own lives and never find happiness in either this world or any other. And in verse 41, he says, those established in the knowledge of self and have realized themselves have renounced selfish desires and attachments to their action in the fire of yoga, uniting themselves with God, and then work performed in His devotion becomes worship and do not bind them. And in the last verse of this fourth Adhyaya, 4.42, Krishna is now giving a call to action to Arjun. After sharing the supreme knowledge, he is saying, hey Arjun, cut your doubts that arise in your heart with this sword of knowledge. Become a Karm yogi. Perform your action. That is your warrior duty to fight the war in wisdom. That is in a selfless service to me. So rise up and do your duties in the spirit of Karm Yoga. So that's what this Adhyaya was all. So if in short we have to understand the essence of this transcendental knowledge, then what it is? It is first, do your duty, which falls into one of the four categories decided by Krishna as per the gunas and the karmas. Then second, do it as a sacrifice to Krishna. Pursue any of these three sacrifices that he mentions. Then third, do it in the wisdom of selflessness, which is superior to just doing it physically. And then fourth, do it with the help of Guru by surrendering to him and serving him. And then you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries, situated firmly in this divine knowledge. So that's what this chapter was all about. I hope you like it, and I'll see you again in my next video. Till then, take care. Have a great day. Bye bye. Hare Krishna.